Thank you very much for that, Ben. I've been Call Center Help is the big call center magazine. If you've not come across us, callcenterhelp.com, very easy to find. So I've been asked to give 3 predictions for the future, which I think is a bit scary. So when I ever look at a prediction, I think, well, why don't we start by having a look at some predictions that have happened before in the past. And early on in my career, I read a report. And that was a report by UBS Phillips and Drew. It was published in March 1991, and it was called Bloodbath in the High Street, Banks and Building Starters. And the premise of this report was that with the future technology, in that case it was telephone banking, we would have no need for banks and building societies in the future. Pretty bold prediction, and probably for about 20 years, there was no real change, even though this new technology came in. But if you can now jump forward, what you see is it was the right prediction. It's just they predicted the wrong time and they predicted the wrong technology. It was actually internet banking that made the change. And actually, compared to what they were predicting in that article, I think what has happened is an awful lot more profound. It peaked probably in about 2017 in terms of the number of branch closures. So it all goes to show that sometimes the prediction is right, but it takes a bit longer than you think. So if you're going to do a prediction or a forecast, the first thing you need to realize is if it's a forecast, it's wrong. So probably everything I'm going to say to you may or may not be right. And so I'd encourage you to have that with a pinch of salt. And so I'm not really a futurologist because we can't see the future, but we can examine the past. So effectively, we're not futurologists, we're historians. And if you look at what a historian does, they tend to look for patterns in the soil. This is an archaeological dig that my brother did many years ago at Housesteads on Hadrian's Wall, which is a fascinating place to go and visit. I went up to visit him while I was digging. They look for patterns in the soil, see if there's just changes in the soil pattern. What we can do is we can look at patterns in the data, and based on what we've seen in the past, we can to some extent extrapolate that from the future. So you can get some sort of predictions for the future. The amazing one, I've got an incredible accuracy on doing weather forecasts. And we've got more weather you can throw a stick at. And I can tell you a technique of how you can get to 70% forecast accuracy in the weather with almost no skill at all. Very, very simple technique. And it's 70% accurate, so the Met Office need to pay attention to this. And very simple. Today is tomorrow. So today has been overcast and a bit chilly. Tomorrow is probably going to be overcast and a bit chilly. And that will get you 70% accuracy. And if you're looking at, say, a forecast of call volumes in a call center, I know the different days of the week are the same, but actually go and have a look at your forecasts and see how much your forecast for tomorrow is any different from what happened last Friday. And you'd be amazed at how similar it all is. So, that's one way of looking at the data. Surprisingly accurate, all sorts of different things, mainly in the weather, because actually weather tends to follow a three-day pattern. So when we look at the impact of things like technology and like the bloodbath on the high street, one of the things you tend to see is that we underestimate the change that technology may have, but on the other hand, we tend to overestimate how quickly that will happen. And you're seeing that now with things like artificial intelligence to come through. So that's all the way I'm basically building up that all my predictions are probably going to be wrong, but here's some things I've observed in the data. The first is that the telephone has been, and will be the primary key channel that people use. We've been tracking this metric now for about 10 years, about the amount of voice traffic with all the digital channels that have come through. What you've actually seen over time is this is the amount of inbound voice That's actually slightly increased as a percentage over time. And what you actually look is that the amount of outbound voice has fallen slightly, but predominantly most people like to interact with contact centres over the telephone. There are some challenges that we're likely going to be seeing in the future as we go through. Oh, so this is, if you haven't seen it here, 2023, inbound voice is 55%, outbound voice 12.7%, emails probably up a bit over a few years ago, 16%, and even things like live chat, still only about 7% of overall volumes. So telephone is going to be the channel for quite some considerable time, I think. But some of the warning signs. The first is that young people under 24s don't like using the telephone. They like doing everything on messaging if they can. And there's some research that's come out. I've got links here if you've got access to all the presentations. Something like a quarter of 18 to 24s will refuse to pick up the telephone if it's ringing, even if it's from their parents. It is quite remarkable. So I think that's going to be one challenge we see in terms of voice in contact centres we're going through. I think one of the other problems you see is things like we did a site visit recently to the Superdry contact centre, and they decided that since everything was going digital and they weren't doing a very good job on answering the phone, that they were going to turn off the telephone in the contact centre. Would be absolutely fine. They had to look at their Trustpilot scores. That was absolutely fine. And when you read the Trustpilot scores, basically the Trustpilot score said, I ordered this coat, I ordered this dress, it came 2 days later, they're going to get 5 out of 5. And they're still, to some extent, kidding themselves that everything is fine. If you go to a different website, here's a great one called Pissed Customer, which now that they may be slightly biased on who goes on this, but they score absolutely appallingly. You know, the experience was terrible. I was not able to change. By call, unable to reach them. Via email, no response. No live chat visible. It sucks. You can't reach anyone. So it's one of these ideas where people have a very good idea of we're not doing things well, so let's not do it at all. But fundamentally, you're turning off the one channel that people choose to like. So my first prediction is that voice will be the channel of the future. So probably not a profound impact that, but it's very important when we get into AI and live chat and all these exciting so-called cheaper channels that it's very easy to get caught up on it and forget what people are actually looking for. Next one, I think AI is going to be a game changer. There is no doubt at all of that overall. But just like the other technology we talked about, I think it's going to have a profound effect on customer service in the long term, and probably, like a lot of technologies, more profound than we can even imagine at this moment in time. But don't underestimate how long that change is likely to take place. And I think one of the problems you find with AI, and this was, my son is a computer engineer, got a first and a distinction in computer engineering, studied a lot in AI, and he told me one thing. And he said, very simply, if AI knows the correct answer, it will give it to you. The problem is, if it doesn't know the answer, it will make it up. And that's, Ben talked about the idea of DPD, is it kind of made it up. So in a way, what the skill we've got in the short term, overall, over time, will get better at knowing the correct answer because the data set will be bigger. And so in the short term, if it hasn't given the right answer, can we recognize that and can we work with it? So generative AI, for instance, it can give you an essay, as long as you can actually check the facts. Could be quite a good way of doing things, but there will be a certain inaccuracy around it. So there are some areas where it's probably very good to use AI. The first one is in speech recognition and in speech analytics. All speech recognition, speech analytics has, and pretty well always has, used neural networks as part of this. And this is a very mature technology. So everyone's getting very excited about AI. 2009 was probably the first webinar I did. That was 15 years ago on speech analytics, and I predicted it was going to have a profound effect then. That was in the crossing the chasm. That was the innovator phase at that time. It's a very established technology. It gets it wrong. It makes it up some of the time, but it's probably what, about 98% accurate?
Yeah.
Now in terms of its
less than 5%. As well.
Yeah. So it's an area where, yes, long term will have that effect. And I'd say this is a very safe area to use artificial intelligence, but it's not the latest flavor of it. Ben mentioned before after call notes. A great idea where if you get the after call notes slightly wrong, it's more a guide for telling people what transpired on the previous example. You're probably not going to read those notes back to the customer. You can check it with the accuracy. So that's probably quite a good idea to do with it as well. And also things like for generative AI, knowledge bases, which is one of the key things you've got. One of the biggest problems is the people who are most likely to be able to generate a knowledge base article are probably the people who are least likely to do it. And generative AI is a very good way to stop writer's block. If you're thinking, what am I going to do? How am I going to write this? Get going on generative AI, give me a few ideas for this based on this information I've got. And then if you've got any common sense about it, you can say, oh, that bit's not right, this wrong. It can speed up that whole process. So I think those are very, very good uses of AI. The one area probably not to use AI which is where the one that everyone thinks we can replace people straight away with a chatbot. And what you're seeing now is that chatbots are currently being flagged as by 36% of respondents as the most likely channel to deliver a poor outcome. This is news this was published in November, so it was relatively recently. So I would caution in the short term, or even the medium term, the use of AI in chatbots, because you can't check for those right answers in there, and a lot of what you call is AI is stuff you could find on Google on the search pages anyway. So use AI with caution, but I think it will have a big impact. And I think with things like chatbots, what we'll discover going around another cycle, look at the pattern in the past, is this ties me that customer service doesn't really matter and we can get the chatbots to do it. That was sort of how we were a few years ago when customer service doesn't really matter, we can get it handled in India. And it was, this is now going back to 2011 when Santander decided that strategy was flawed, that people didn't like actually dealing with offshore call centers if they could handle it more locally, or that nuance, or that knowledge that people had, that way of interacting with people. And I suspect what we'll see is this rush into chatbots will form into an overall backlash. So my third prediction is I think customer service is the new marketing. I think that backlash of offshoring, of chatbotting, of turning off the voice channel will cause a certain reaction, and companies will suddenly start thinking, where's all our business gone? Superdry certainly having some financial problems currently. So I think customer service is the new marketing, and really the reason behind that is it's cheaper to keep an existing customer than it is to attract a new customer. I wouldn't say, a lot of people say it's 5 times. I'm not sure that's quite the right number. But I love this comment from Aaron at Sprinkler, who said, marketers are trying to bring in new customers while the customer service team is working quickly to get customers off the phone. The result is a crippling inability to truly understand and serve the customer. And you can kind of look at it through. I read, again, this is going back to 1996, I read this amazing book by Frederick Reichold from Bain and Company called The Loyalty Effect. And basically, they're able to put a price on what a loyal customer can do. And what they found is a 5% increase in customer retention can produce more than 25% increase in profit. This isn't particularly new research, but I think people have lost a lot of sight of this in business. And so I've come up with a catchphrase, which I should have said someone clever rather than putting my name on it, would have been better. Customer service is not a cost, it is an investment. I know a lot of us believe that. But how do you turn the dial of the conversation from being cost to an investment? And I think the secret to doing that is it's easy to work out the cost. How do you get the return on the investment? And it's something called the customer lifetime value. That's working out effectively what is the lifetime value of one customer, of one single customer on average over their lifetime. So a good example, public figures, Sky TV have got £47 per customer per month on average, published figures, which is £564 a year. They were publishing a 10.1% churn rate, which means on average they keep customers for 9.5 years. If you take 564 divided by the inverse of 9.4 years, the customer lifetime value is £5,371 per customer. When you start adopting that around the boardroom, you can say, what is more important? Is it more important that we save 10% on the cost of an individual transaction by putting in a chatbot? So you might save £1, or is it more important that we try and retain this £5,371? And I think when you start to adopt that in the conversations we have around boardrooms, you'll start to see a very different approach to customer service being new marketing. So that really summarizes my third, I've gone the wrong way. My third one, which is prediction. Customer service is not a cost, it's an investment. So that's my 3 predictions. They're probably all wrong, but based on the data I see at the time is as good as you're going to get. Thank you very much.